Hi, and welcome to Gadget News and Review. We are home to some of the coolest gadgets, and the best consumer reviews online, buyer's guides and features. If you like our review, please subscribe for more upcoming reviews videos. Apple MacBook Air 2019 Review. The new MacBook Air is here after a tumultuous few years for Apple's thin and light MacBook. The MacBook Air used to be the most affordable way to get a MacBook, but then it appeared to fall out of favor when Apple repositioned the 12-inch MacBook as both the thinnest and cheapest of its laptops. However, in a rather surprising move, Apple ditched the 12-inch MacBook line, releasing a refreshed MacBook Air for 2019 at the same time. So, with the MacBook Air back in what many people consider its rightful place as the most affordable Apple laptop, will this year's model manage to bring Apple's vaunted design and build quality to a new audience who are put off by the MacBook Pro's high price? Apple's announcement of a new MacBook Air was pleasant for a number of reasons. First of all, we weren't really been expecting a refresh. And second, Apple also announced that the entry-level MacBook Air was getting a price cut to $1,099, £1,099, £1,699 Australian dollars. While that's still far from budget territory, this move makes the MacBook Air more affordable than ever, and seeing prices going down with updates, rather than up, is always a nice welcome. For comparison's sake, the MacBook Air 2018 started at $1,199, £1,199, £1,849 Australian dollars when it rolled out. The base model of the MacBook Air comes with a 1.6 GHz dual-core 8th generation Intel Core i5 processor with turbo boost up to 3.6 GHz, 8 GB of LPDDR3 RAM, 128 GB storage and Intel UHD graphics 617. There's also a model with the same specs, but with twice the storage at 256 GB, which costs $1,299, £1,299, £1,999 Australian dollars. That basically means you're getting 128 GB more for $200 per £200 per 300 Australian dollars, a pretty costly upgrade. It's a bit frustrating that Apple has kept that big leap in price for a relatively small amount of extra storage space. Meanwhile, you can double your iPhone XR storage for another $50 per £50. It makes much more financial sense to get the 128 GB version, and then either invest in an external hard drive or utilize cloud storage like iCloud to save your files. As is unfortunately the case with Apple's hardware, there's no easy way to open up the MacBook Air yourself and upgrade the SSD. Therefore, while we're happy to see the price drop for the MacBook Air, shipping a premium, and while the Air is the cheapest MacBook, at this price it's still premium, laptop with just 128 GB of storage seems pretty mean in 2019, especially when Apple then charges so much for a storage upgrade. One of the biggest threats to the MacBook Air is that Windows laptops are now even slimmer and more powerful than ever. Apple no longer has the monopoly on thin and light laptops, and there are a number of Windows-based Ultrabooks that offer similar, or better, specifications for the same price. And, you can guarantee that they all have bigger hard drives than 128 GB. For example, the HP Spectre X360 2019 is around the same price and offers 256 GB storage and a much faster processor. The lower entry price of the MacBook Air is definitely welcome if you're set on investing in a MacBook. However, some of Apple's less appealing habits are still evident, and with increased competition from Windows laptops, there are much better value options out there. Like with the new MacBook Pro, Apple has not revamped the outside design of the MacBook Air from last year's model. This is great news if you already love the design of the MacBook Air, but not so if you were hoping for a more considerable change. This also means that you get the same thin laptop with dimensions of 11.97 by 8.36 by 0.61 inches, 30.41 by 21.24 by 1.56 centimeters, and a weight of 2.75 pounds, 1.25 kilograms. It remains an impressively lightweight laptop, and while it's not as mind-blowingly light as rivals like the Acer Swift 7, the Apple MacBook Air is a device you can easily carry around in a bag or backpack. Despite being thin and lightweight, it does feel robust and solid, so you won't have to worry about it getting bent or dented. This is thanks to the MacBook Air being built out of an aluminum alloy that looks great and feels sturdy. By keeping the same design as last year's model, the new MacBook Air is once again made out of 100% recycled aluminum, which means that no new metal has been mined to create this device. That's a massive selling point for anyone concerned about the environment, and something we commend Apple for. However, by keeping the same design, it means this year's model still keeps the same elements we weren't too fond of in the 2018 model. The fact that the MacBook Air only comes with two Thunderbolt 3 ports is frustrating but understandable, considering the svelte design of the laptop. However, Apple's decision to put both ports on the left-hand side baffled and annoyed us in 2018, and it continues to do so in 2019. If one port had been placed on each side, it would have given people a bit more flexibility when charging the MacBook Air. Instead, you always need to sit in a certain position with the power adapter plugged into the left of the laptop. It also makes the MacBook Air feel a little cluttered, and slightly unbalanced, if you plug in two, or more if you have an adapter, devices into the Thunderbolt 3 ports. One area where Apple has made a change, and a welcome one at that, is with the keyboard. The new MacBook Air now uses the improved third-generation butterfly keyboard that came with this year's MacBook Pros. Previous versions of the MacBook keyboards using older butterfly switches were prone to problems such as sticky and unresponsive keys. Apple has gotten a lot of flack for this, unsurprisingly, as when you're spending a lot of money on a laptop, you'd expect the keyboard to actually work. The controversy has been a stain on Apple's typically impeccable reputation for quality control and reliability. The updated keyboard is aimed at making it less likely to have issues, though some people will inevitably think that this doesn't go far enough. When spending this kind of money, less likely to go wrong just won't cut it. While Apple's Keyboard Service program, which will replace a faulty keyboard free of charge, extends to this year's MacBook Air, it also suggests that the issue is still persistent. At this point, we hope that the next MacBook Air, and other MacBook models, ditch the clearly problematic butterfly switch altogether. As with the previous version, Touch ID is also included, allowing you to log into the MacBook Air with your fingerprint, or pay for stuff using Apple Pay. The larger Force Touch trackpad is also present, and like with last year's model, it feels pleasant to use and works well. Overall, the MacBook Air 2019's design hasn't changed much, which in some ways is a good thing, but it's also disappointing as well. Hopefully, the next version of the MacBook Air will try something as revolutionary as the original MacBook Air was. Perhaps the most noteworthy change with the MacBook Air is that the screen now supports Apple's True Tone technology. The True Tone feature automatically adjusts the color temperature, most noticeably whites, shown on the screen, depending on the ambient light you're using the MacBook Air in. It can have a pleasing effect. When you first start the MacBook Air, you can toggle the setting on and off to see the difference it makes. And, while this setting may not be for everyone, we have found it does a nice job of making colors look more natural. True Tone has been included in MacBook Pros for a while now, and we've often thought that wasn't always the perfect fit. MacBook Pros are often used by photographers, video editors and digital creatives who require accurate colors, something that True Tone messes with. However, with the MacBook Air, which is used as a more casual laptop where color accuracy isn't as important, having this feature makes much more sense. It's a nice feature, but probably not one that would cause you to want to ditch your 2018 model for this year's. Elsewhere, the screen remains the same, so a 13.3-inch Retina display with 2560 by 1600 resolution that offers sharp and vibrant colors. Last year's model introduced impressively thin bezels around the display, making the screen span almost the entire width of the MacBook Air. The display has long been one of the best features of the MacBook Air, so we're pleased that, True Tone aside, Apple hasn't messed with that winning formula. Since the MacBook Air 2019 has the exact same specifications as the 2018 model, you can imagine that there isn't a noteworthy uptick in performance. That's a bit frustrating, especially as the MacBook Air is running the same dual-core 1.6 GHz, Intel Core i5-8210Y, which can turbo boost up to 3.6 GHz. As with last year's model, this, backed by 8 GB of RAM, is fine for day-to-day tasks, and macOS, Apple's operating system, runs nice and smooth. However, in 2019 a dual-core processor in such an expensive laptop leaves the MacBook Air feeling underpowered and overpriced, and the new price cut does little to fix that. Also, not long after Apple released the MacBook Air, Intel unveiled its Ice Lake processors, which offer performance improvements, and quad-core offerings for the first time in Intel's Y series of processors, which are fanless CPUs designed for slimline laptops like the MacBook Air. We can't help but think that, if Apple had held off releasing the MacBook Air until later in the year, we would have gotten one with a new quad-core CPU, giving the laptop a major performance boost and making it a much more compelling upgrade. However, we may have to wait until next year to see that. In other words, the MacBook Air performance is fine, but a little lackluster compared to its increasingly compelling competitors. A dual-core processor, limit of 16 GB of RAM if you pay for extra, and a small SSD leaves the MacBook Air feeling a little left behind in the performance stakes. One area that the MacBook Air really excels in, and handily beats many Windows 10 competitors at this price point, is battery life, with this year's model lasting bang on 10 hours in our battery life tests. This involves playing a loop 1080p video with the screen set to 50% brightness. Reaching 10 hours is a fantastic feat, and depending on how you use the MacBook Air, you should easily get more than a whole workday's use out of it without you needing to charge. This makes it an excellent choice for students who require a laptop with a battery that can last over several lectures. The low-powered components are mainly to thank here, along with Apple's more power-efficient software. If battery life is of the utmost importance, you may find that it's worth compromising on performance. The MacBook Air 2019 also does a great job of keeping its charge when it's put into sleep mode, where you close the lid of the MacBook Air, rather than fully closing down macOS. Apple claims up to 30 days of standby time, and while we didn't have time to check that, we were once again impressed by how well the MacBook Air 2019 holds onto its battery when not in use. Many Windows laptops, in our experience, continue to drain battery even in sleep mode. That's often resulted in us picking up a laptop after a day or so of not using it, only to find the battery completely drained. That didn't happen with the MacBook Air. Battery life is the one area, outside of design, where the MacBook Air really shines. Apple's release of the MacBook Air is a bit baffling. It's not been that long since the release of the MacBook Air 2018, and this new version only adds a few new improvements. While True Tone is a nice feature, it's far from essential, though Apple's continued improvement of the keyboard's reliability is certainly welcome. The thing we like most about the MacBook Air 2019 is the new price. This makes it more affordable than ever to get a MacBook. However, despite the price cut, this is still a very pricey laptop, and the low-powered components pale in comparison with modern Windows 10 laptops at the same price. With Apple continuing to add new features to macOS, you may find the MacBook Air start to feel a bit slow and outdated far too soon. The timing of this release also means the MacBook Air doesn't take advantage of Intel's new Ice Lake processors, some of which seem perfect for a slim and light laptop like the MacBook Air. This leads us to think that next year we'll see a more substantial update. So unless you're desperate for the latest version, we'd recommend holding off until 2020 or seeing if prices start to drop for the 2018 model.